What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today I'm going to be showing you guys the build that I used for Mayflower's Gryphon Heart run, as well as kind of walk through the actual run itself to kind of show you guys what I'm doing as a tank. So if you guys are interested in either doing a +3 clear or eventually progressing through Gryphon Heart yourselves, you guys can kind of use our run as kind of a learning point. So just to kind of reiterate here, Mayflower is not what I would call a competitive raid guild. We are, in the way I would define it, would be we are a completion guild. We're an achievement hunting guild, which basically means that while all of us are very good at the roles that we play, our primary goal as a guild is not necessarily to be the fastest, to get the highest score, or anything like that. Our goal is simply to get achievements, and we will use tools that are put into the game for us if, in order to get those achievements. Obviously, we'll not be expert or anything like that, but we will typically be a little bit more flexible as to, specific sets that we're running. While we will be optimizing a little bit here, we're not going to go to extreme lengths that other sort of competitive raid guilds will do. Just bear that in mind when you take a look at our runs and how we did our run, and comparing that to something like Mechanically Challenged or Hodor or some other competitive endgame guilds. We're not quite our sort of niches that we kind of want to accomplish and things like that. They don't really coincide very well. So I'm just going to go over gear, and then we will switch gears a little bit and take a look at the Gryphon Heart run itself. Will go through both what I'm doing when I'm taking Zamaja up in the upstairs phase, and then what I'm doing in the downstairs phase, as well as what my role is in execute. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. So first, in terms of gear, so the monster helm set that I decided to run was Earthgore, and that was mainly because of the massive burst heal that it gives me. I found this to be very useful when I was downstairs. It definitely helps save me a couple times when I'm downstairs. Because you don't have a healer downstairs, and while I could feasibly run downstairs without running Earthgore, again, we wanted to make sure that we were basically taking as safe as a route as possible without necessarily giving up too much DPS. So we decided to just stick with Earthgore compared to something like Symphony of Blades instead on all of our support roles. So that's why I'm running Earthgore here. Now, I do not have ideal traits. I have 2 Divines rather than a sturdy shoulder and an infused helm, but I managed to get Gryphon Heart with this, so it doesn't really matter what your traits really are. But ideally, you would have sturdy shoulders and infused helm here. Now for my body set, I ran Plague Doctor here. The other main tank ran Jailer's Tenacity instead, so both of those sets were ones that we considered running as our body set. Eben was ran on our off tank, so that's why we don't have Eben here. So again, very similar to kind of the concept behind Earthgore. We just wanted to play it really safe, so we decided to go with just more selfish sets as our body sets, mainly because Eben was already being provided by our off tank, so we didn't need to run Eben at all. So we basically kind of looked at Plague Doctor, Jailers, and Torag's Pact as our 3 main options here. Eventually, we decided that we weren't going to run Torag's Pact. It was going to be a little bit too much give up in survivability overall. So we decided to go with Plague Doctor on me, and then Jailers Tenacity on the other main tank. So Plague Doctor is just, as you could expect, just a massive amount of health. But to Jailers, if you guys are not really aware of what Jailers does, it basically, when you lose 7,000 or more health in a single attack, you gain Major Vitality for 5 seconds, which increases your healing received by 30%. So this is going to be very, very strong in the execute phase, which is really the most dangerous phases for the main tanks. We want to get our healed up as basically up to our maximum health in order to get rid of the baneful mark that goes out during execute, and Jail's Tenacity will give us 5 seconds of Major Vitality when that goes out, which basically gives the healers a little bit more breathing room in terms of just trying to get us all the way up. So when we have the Major Vitality combined with the Minor Vitality from Green Dragon Blood, and then we have mending from the healers, along with any sort of additional healing received buffs that we're getting. So for example, because both of our main tanks are Dragonites, we get 12% additional healing received when we have Green Dragon Blood active. So all that combined, and then we were running, I believe, 1 Harmony on both of us, and we were running our Blood Altars. So Jailers is really, really strong. We basically didn't have to swap main tanks at all during execute, as you guys will see when we go over the run. So I am doing sturdy small and infused on my large pieces, both prismatic enchants, health enchants on my smalls. And then for jewelry, this is where things got a little bit weird here. So I have a lot of different characters, so I don't have exactly enough transmutes to really transmute everything the way I exactly want it. But this is what I eventually ran up with. So we decided to stick with Alkosh as our second set. So this is jewelry and weapons. We just wanted to have additional penetration. From the Alkosh debuff, and the additional damage also didn't hurt either. Now, in terms of enchants, I went with 2 shield play and 1 reduced stamina cost. You could swap out this stamina cost with another shield play enchant, or if you want, you can run like a magic regen glyph if you'd like. In terms of traits, traits. Definitely would highly recommend taking a look at running at the very least 1 harmony if you want to do Gryphon Heart or a +3 progression. That's just so you get additional healing out of your overflowing blood altar. That is going to be a very, very strong synergy to run in execute phase. So, you go get the painful outs that drops your health down to about 10% or so. You pop your dragon blood, you get some source of major vitality through potions, bone surge, or jailer's tenacity, and then you pop your blood altar synergy, and boom, you get back a really large portion of your health all in once because you're running that harmony. So I highly recommend trying to get at least 1 harmony on your jewelry traits. The rest are your typical tank jewelry traits. So I have triune and robust. You can go double triune. You can go swift. Swift is also not a bad option because you will be running around a lot when you're tanking Zimmaja. So I believe our other main tank ran 1 harmony, 1 swift, and I want to say 1 triune, but I can double check on that. Initially he ran 1 harmony and 2 swift, but he swapped out 1 swift, I believe, for that triune or another harmony enchant. For weapons, sword and board on the front bar, ice staff on the back bar just for the additional block. So you'll see when I go over our Gryphon Heart run why I prefer the ice staff, but every tank does it a little bit differently. Don't necessarily take what I do as the way that you should be doing your Gryphon Heart or +3 progression. Now you will notice that I am running minor breach poisons. We decided to put our infused crushers on our healers instead, that basically allowed the tanks to really just not really be all that concerned with dropping blockade for the crusher uptime. That just allowed the healers to focus on crusher, and then we just basically made up for the lack of power of the light with minor breach poisons. So that is the route that we decided to go with in Mayflower. It ended up working out very well. Crusher uptime was pretty decent, and the minor breach, because both main tanks are running it, ended up also being pretty decent as well. Now for attributes, this is pretty much all standard tank stuff, so whatever race you want to be as a tank. I have 50 health, 10 stam for Magicka. It's obviously going to vary depending on your race. Atranak as your Mundus, again, not that much different here. Purple food, increase all primary stats, again, nothing out of the ordinary. Now you will notice that we do have, generally speaking, you will have a little bit lower resistances. I do not believe I am in Cloud Rest resist. Nope, I am not in Cloud Rest CP, so I will adjust those real quick, just so you know what my actual resistance should look like. Okay, so this is what your resistances are going to look like before you have your Major Ward, Major Resolve. So when you do have Major Ward, Major Resolve, you will obviously have higher resistances. So you'll have 32 to 50 as your spell resistance. Physical resistance doesn't really matter quite as much. The only sort of physical resistance you're going to be facing off against in +3 is going to be coming from the monstrosities when you're done with the downstairs phase. And that should be dying fairly quickly, so you don't really need to worry about it all too much when it comes to pure physical resistance. You're going to want to focus in more on the spell resistance instead. For skills, front bar is your pretty much cut and dry standard tank, so Pierce Armor, Heroic Slash. I have Fragmented Shield for the major mending. Balance, Absorb Magic. This really helps out when she does her Nocturnal's Favor, the heavy attack. Then I have Temporal Guard, so this is a very powerful tool to use and execute, as you guys might see when we go over the actual fight itself. On our back bar, we have Inner Rage, Green Dragon Blood, Engulfing Flames. We are pretty much running all Magicka, so we do want to have that Engulfing Flames debuff. Crushing Shock for those instances where you need to kite out of like a cone that's coming out from center portal along with Crushing Darkness, and she's doing her interruptible. You don't necessarily have to run Crushing Shock. We decided to do it again just to play it safe, both for the downstairs Shaded Zimmaja's interruptible as well as the upstairs Zimmaja's interruptible, but you can replace this with Ellie Drain instead. So I was running Ellie Drain earlier for the Magicka DPS downstairs, but we found that it wasn't really necessary for them downstairs, so we decided to just swap it out with Crushing Shock to give us a little bit of additional sort of a safety net there for the interruptible. And then Unrelenting Grip, this is going to be used to chain in the Yagra little Yagras that are in downstairs so they don't go up in the portal, and you will see that being used when we go over the actual fight. And of course, aggressive Warhorn here. Then for champion points, this is going to be a pretty cut and dry standard tanking setup. So I personally have 64 Arcanist, 49 Tenacity, 61 Shadow Ward, 40 Tumbling, 44 Warlord, 12 Sprinter. You should ideally put a few more points into Sprinter because you will be sprinting around a lot, and that will just help you conserve stam. You don't really need to dodge rolling too much. So if you want to take points out of Tumbling, you can put them into Sprinter. You will be doing a little bit of breaking free though, so I would probably try to get at least 40 points into Warlord there. Blue CP, 75 Blessed, 81 Elfborn, the rest can go wherever you'd like. And then for our red CPs, because we are the main tank and we are swapping off on Zamaja, we are focusing in on magical resistances. We aren't taking the minis at all, so we don't have to worry about the physical attacks. The physical attacks that we need to worry about are coming from the Veldreth, which should be dying fairly quickly. So you don't need to worry about them all too much. You can pretty much dodge roll most the physical hit that they do, which is the heavy attack. So we're not really focused all that much on physical resistances at all. So we have 81 Ironclad, 53 Spell Shield, 61 Thick Skin, and 75 into Elemental Defender. You definitely still want to have 61 points in Thick Skin because of the Dark Drain dot, which is pretty strong, and you're also going to get Creeping Shadows, which is a dot that's applied on you from Zamaja when you get hit by enough Mind Blasts. So the Thick Skinned points there is going to be pretty important overall for your overall survivability. Alright, so that's pretty much all of the build stuff. So now we're going to go ahead and swap gears and take a look over at the, let me just pull it up here. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the actual run itself. So let's go ahead and transition over. Alright, so this is basically going to be at the start of the run. Let me just turn on the volume here so you guys can hear me talk over the actual video. Alright, so let's skip ahead here to when we actually go through. So this is the start of our Gryphon Heart pull here. This is the pull that eventually ended up with our Gryphon Heart. So the strategy that most guilds do for +3 is basically pull all of the adds over to the left creeper, and then everybody single targets the right creeper and drops dots on the left creeper. So hopefully, ideally, the creepers will both die around the same time, and obviously you are cleaving down the monstrosities and all the other adds here. And then obviously, if you're going for Gryphon Heart, you just pull right away. If you need time between when you kill the ads and when you pull Zamaja, just make sure to communicate that as the raid lead. But if you're going for Gryphon Heart, you obviously want to just go right away. So Octavio is starting off with Zamaja here. I'm going to go down the portal first. So for those of you guys who are very familiar with +3, pretty much goes exactly as you would expect for your standard +3. You're just hitting on Zamaja until the portal spawns. Now, obviously here I am making sure to basically keep an eye on the Engulfing Flames debuff. So you can see here up in the upper left-hand corner that I do have raid buffs active to kind of track Crusher, Engulfing Flames, Weakening, Off Balance, Alkosh, and Minor Vulnerability. So I am keeping an eye on that Engulfing. So both of us are running Engulfing and both of us are running Alkosh. So we do have some overlap there because it will track his as well as mine. But generally speaking, I'll just take a look at the raid buffs rather than my own timer down here with action duration reminder. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty much cut and dry. You just do what you would normally do for +3, except you do have a little bit less survivability. Again, it depends on what sets you are running for your +3 clears. So the ideal sort of benchmark to kind of meet for a good Gryphon Heart run is by the time the first portal spawns, you want to make sure Zamaja is, or not Zamaja, you want to make sure Sororia is spawning. Alright, so then downstairs, so this is where you're going to see me use Unrelenting Grip. So for those of you guys who are not aware, there are going to be little Yagras that spawn downstairs, and you just want to make sure to chain them so they don't get into the portal. You'll also notice here that I basically let her go through her interruptible animations for quite a while before it actually interrupted. And that's a nice strategy to make use of, because while she is channeling that interruptible, she's not going to be moved, she's not going to do any sort of additional mechanics. So if you let that play out a little bit there, you basically get yourself a little bit of an extra second and a half of breathing room, which can make a little bit of a difference. You will need to kind of figure out the timing herself. So if we go back and take a look at her actual animation here, so you'll see the animation start up just a second here. So right here, see she kind of does like a sort of waves her hands up and then starts to bring them down. When she starts to bring them down, that's typically when I try to interrupt. There is a little bit more time that you can play around with. So after she brings her hands down, she actually brings them back up again. And you do want to interrupt before she brings her hands up. So generally speaking, she does basically the animation looks like that. She just does her hands up and then she sort of goes up and goes back down. So when it goes back down, that's when you want to interrupt, and that's a pretty safe place to interrupt. Again, you probably have another additional second when it's down here and before it goes back up and it actually drops somebody, but the safest place is when she drops her hands all the way down there. And then so hopefully you'll see me use chains here in just a second. So yeah, so you can see here that as she's porting, I'm basically running around and chaining those minis, these little Yagras, so that way they don't hit the portal. So they only go upstairs if they happen to reach the portal. So if they never reach the portal, they'll never get put up upstairs. Now there are basically a couple of conflicting opinions on this. One opinion is just let them continue to go out. Basically the idea is that if you do decide to chain them, they'll suddenly spawn 3 or 4 all the time, which is going to be a little bit harder on the DPS for survivability, versus if you let them come out, slowly trickle out one at a time, DPS can just basically just burn them down as they pop up. Both camps are valid ways to do this, but we personally prefer to try to chain in as many as we can away from the portal and basically try to delay them as much as we can here. We also do try to tell the upstairs group when a Yagra is coming up. It just makes it a little bit easier for them to anticipate, especially the off tank, because they will have to grab those Yagras. And then you're just going to grab the Monstrosity, and we typically will be stacking Sororia on Zamaja. So there's a couple different ways you can do Gryphon Heart. The safest way is basically to stack Sororia on Zamaja, stack Reliquin in the center, and then stack Gallenway on Zamaja as well. For this particular Gryphon Heart run, because we do want to play a little bit safer, we decide to only stack Sororia on Zamaja, and then we decide to leave Gallenway and Reliquin in the center instead. So that's what we did instead here. But the Monstrosity, pretty much you're just going to stack it on the mini if there's a mini up, otherwise you're going to be stacking it on Zamaja instead. But then here we swap Taunt on Zamaja, so we have main tank swapping on Zamaja rather than the mini boss. So that basically allows the main tanks to focus in solely on spell resistance, so we won't have to necessarily split our CPs between Hardy and Elemental Defender. Gives us basically helps us optimize our mitigation a little bit more. There is an argument for swapping on the minis instead, but generally speaking, most raid groups swap on Zamaja rather than swapping on the minis, just kind of for that sort of resistance mitigation there. And so, again, tanking Zamaja is pretty much cut and dry. It's pretty standard for what you would normally do in a normal +3 non-Gryphon Heart run. Obviously, the big thing here is also you kind of have to keep an eye on Alkosh and Engulfing Flames. Now, obviously, you do want to play it a little bit safer, so you just want to make sure you're not taking unnecessary risks or anything like that. And you just definitely, again, want to keep an eye on Engulfing Flames and Alkosh here, just to make sure that you're getting as high uptimes as you possibly can. And then from there, it's just basically pretty much what you would normally do for a +3 progression. There's really nothing to change here besides the fact that you do want to be a little bit more careful, play a little bit more conservatively. You still want to obviously maximize your overall debuffs and things like that. But it's mostly as a tank, there's not much that changes here in Gryphon Heart compared to like your typical +3 run here. So we're going to go ahead and skip ahead here a little bit to execute. So you guys can see what tanks are doing at execute here. Alright, so now we're starting our execute phase, so we managed to get Zamaja down to 5%, and so we're starting our execute, so you'll notice that you basically stack, again, this is pretty much identical to +3, so you have a left group and you have a right group. Tanks can pretty much be wherever you want one healer, obviously on each side. The tank that was tanking the off tank is typically going to be in the way back, so you will not see Cat here. Cat is our off tank who is tanking the minis. She is basically behind all of us here, and she's basically cutting the crushing darkness, and hopefully any creepers that spawn will go for her, the Razor Thorns will go for her rather than somebody in the group. That basically just allows DPS to focus in on doing the mechanics and things like that. So obviously we have double bombs, just want to make sure we're calling out where the bombs are going. In execute, same thing with +3, you get 2 bombs, 2 Hoarfrosts, you get 6, and then you get 6, what are these called? Overcharges. Now, Baneful Mark did just happen to go off. Now here, for +3, and especially for Gryphon Heart, it's ideal to make sure that the other tank does not get Baneful Mark. So Baneful Mark will always be applied to whatever tank has Taunt on Zamaja, and then the 5 closest people. So the support roles, in this case we have Walking Eye and Make Noise Man, they are always going to be behind the DPS group. So make sure to tell your DPS to pretty much be as far up against Zamaja as they possibly can. Yes, there's going to be a little bit of DPS dance, everybody has a DPS jitters, and of course you're going to have to see people running around to get orbs and stuff, but for the most part, if you don't have to move, just stick with Zamaja. Just stick right on top of Zamaja. That way the supports will always not get Baneful. Because the idea here is, if Octavio did need to swap out and I also happen to catch a Baneful, we wouldn't be able to swap until one of us cleared our Baneful, in which case it doesn't really, at that point, you might as well just try to heal Octavio all the way back up to full that way. So in this instance here, Octavio did eat the Baneful, and then I didn't. So if he were unable to get that Baneful off him, if we were not able to heal him up all the way up to full, then I would have to jump in and take Zamaja. In this particular Gryphon Heart run, we did not have to do that at all because our healing was really on point. Now, for DPS, all the DPS were running a healing ult, with the exception of, I believe, our Magplar, who, just because their class healing ult is a channeled, which really sucks, you don't want to do that. But the Nightblades and the Sorks were both all running their healing ultimates. So it was the Absorption Field for Sorks, and I believe it was Consuming Darkness or something for Nightblades there. And then our healers are dropping a Blood Altar after every single Baneful goes out, because once you use the Blood Altar synergy once, you can't use it again until Blood Altar is recast. So after Baneful goes out, they recast Blood Altar. That way the main tank is able to get that synergy, Blood Altar synergy, combine that with Harmony and all the other sort of Vitality mending stuff, and basically give them all the way back up to full. You can see here that between Earthgore, the Blood Altar synergy, and all the additional heals from orbs and all the other healing ultimates, pretty much got Octavio all the way back up to full here. Then basically your job as the tank is basically to just continue to debuff, and if you do need to swap off, then you will swap off as needed. You can see here that I tend to drop Hoarfrost in the center. You can go off to the either side here. And again, Baneful went out, Octavio got healed up all the way back up to full thanks to that Harmony and Blood Altar. I'm going to see if he ever ends up using Undo at all. So the thing with Undo is that it will heal you pretty much all the way back up to full if you happen to use it after Baneful, but that's only if you time it correctly. So that's the Baneful, so you did not use Undo here, but there are some instances where you might want to use Undo instead. That basically requires a little bit of timing, so you basically need to make sure that you don't use it too early or you don't use it too late, because it will bring you back exactly 4 seconds. So just be a little bit mindful if you do Undo. The safest way to kind of combat Baneful is basically to either have the tank swap off every single time Baneful goes out and make sure that the other tank just never gets Baneful, or run Harmony and just have all your DPS run healing ultis and have that Blood Altar synergy, overflowing Blood Altar synergy active. So there you have it. That is how I main tanked the Gryphon Heart for Mayflower. Again, there's a lot of different ways you can go about doing this. This is just one way to go about doing Gryphon Heart here. So hopefully you guys found this video informative. If you guys have any questions about Gryphon Heart progression or Cloud Rest +3 progression, feel free to ask down in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Most of my experience in +3 has been from a tank perspective, but I have done a few DPS runs, so I can comment a little bit on DPS. I'm definitely not very fluent with healing on +3. I can heal +2, but I have not healed +3 yet, so I can definitely answer most roles in +3 progression. Again, hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.